Good evening, one and all. Today, I bring you our second Creepypasta collection. But be warned, the word horrifying, as used in the title, is not used lightly. This video is not for the faint of heart. You have been warned. But without further ado, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control.
Shit, man. You heading out of town or something? No. You sharing then? Your buddies better be lifting part of the cost. Nope, not sharing. Okay, you ain't skipping town and you ain't sharing. So what's the deal with you buying in bulk all of a sudden? Don't worry about it, Phil. He handed me the bag with the opus, but he kept his hand on it. You ain't trying to use this all at once, are you? I said, don't worry about it. Look, man, I got an obligation to make sure you ain't gonna try and do that. So make me a promise. You know this stuff. You know what it does. Yeah, it's the deadliest drug in the world, Phil. And you sell it for a living. Since when do you care about responsibility? I don't know, man. I just don't want to lose a good customer, is all, you know? That's $600. I handed him all the money I had left in the world, not like it mattered. And then I took the bag and walked the 3 blocks past the bakery and the bent lamppost and up to my apartment. One last time. There was another eviction notice on the door. Not like it mattered. But rather than tearing it down, I pushed past it, through the hall onto the old table by the chair, took out the baggie of opus, crushed the brick with a knife, and set up the rig. It's a bit like heroin in how you fix up a dose for a shot. You melt it, and then you tie off and stick the needle into whatever vein that was left to be found. And then you push it down, and then you watch the drug swirl with your blood for a bit. Which is beautiful in its own sick way. And then you push it in. And that's where it differentiates from heroin. With heroin, you feel a rush of warmth, but with opus, you don't. You just feel cold, unnaturally so. So if you ever see a scrawny son of a bitch curled up and shivering on a park bench on a summer afternoon, you can bet with an appreciable degree of confidence that he's either got the shakes or he's gotten his hands on a bit of opus. And then after that passes, that's when you feel really, really good. Words can't describe it, to be thoroughly honest. Although euphoria is one of the words people like to pick off the low-hanging branch. All that can be said is that when it hits you, in all its force, and all its momentum, and all its breathtaking might, you can't speak or move or even think. You just lay there and bathe in the majesty of it all, even as your organs scream, and then you pass out. It's a basal pleasure that needs to be experienced to be believed. But stay the hell away from it and all that blah blah blah. Not like it matters. It's what comes after the euphoria that counts anyway. So I did my business, and I felt the rush, and I felt the old euphoria. And then I felt the black clouds swirl in, and my vision tunneled. And soon I was floating away on a dead river, clinging to the last bit of flotsam adrift from a monumental shipwreck. And then I was gone. Hang on, Jess. I'm coming. You know what's a funny expression? Being beside yourself. I've always understood what it meant, of course. You're beside yourself when you're heartbroken, or you're traumatized, or you're angry beyond what words can articulate, and you haven't learned yet how to cope with spectacular pain. But until you're actually beside yourself, hearing the expression doesn't make sense, even if you don't ruminate on its implications. Is there supposed to be another one of me who shares in pain that's too intense for either one of us to bear? Is that what it means to be beside yourself? I don't know, but I found out. It turns out, interestingly, that being beside yourself is what happens when your world comes crashing down. But you react not with rage or sorrow, but with numbness. And it's like you're watching yourself go through the motions of grieving, but you can't actually feel anything because of this emotional firewall that your brain in its finite wisdom erected. You're in shock, like it's someone else whose life was just turned upside down and not yours. An out-of-body experience, and you're just along for the ride. Nothing feels real. The police telling you she's gone? Fake. It has to be, and therefore it is. Phone calls flooding in? Loved ones saying how sorry they are for your loss? Lies. But you go through the motions anyway. And as you say thanks, yeah, I'm doing okay. No, I don't need anything. I don't know when the funeral is. I'll let you know. And all the affairs and the proceedings and the weeping and the disbelief that follow are just part of a weird, twisted dream. It's not real. It can't be. But deep down, of course, you know it's real. Deep down, you know there's an avalanche of pain and anguish and hurt. More of it all than the human spirit was ever built to catalogue. That's waiting like a dragon on the other side of that firewall. And eventually, maybe on the first night you crawl into bed alone, or when her favourite movie comes on and she's not there to share it with you, or when you hear that old song, Firelight, on the radio that played when you first kissed her, and you thought to yourself, how did a guy like me get a girl like her? That dragon will find its way in, and there's no going back from that. You're a new man now, and the lesser one than once you were. That's when you truly learn what it means to be beside yourself, when the real you and the you that was just going through the motions of grief collide into one gigantic, shattered, sobbing mess. You don't care what you look like when it happens. You don't care where you are, or who's watching, or what they'll think. And that's because you can't. 1 minute you're doing okay, and the next all the power of your spirit and all the strength of your arms are being spent on weathering a storm that can't be weathered. Enduring the undurable, accepting the unacceptable. She's gone, and she's not coming back. For me, it happened at Jesse's funeral. Before that, I'd been a robot. But as soon as everyone left, even her parents, and I was the only one standing there on the grass, I lost it. The finality of it hit me like a storm of fists, and the firewall broke down. The dragon swept in. And I just collapsed at the headstone and cried until it hurt. And then I cried some more. My best friend, my partner in crime, my girl, gone, along with a piece of me. It's an impossible and surreal experience to describe. It's mutilating and it's unfair, and yet it is what it is. Life goes on without you, no matter how hard you scream at it. I'm hurting here. Give me a fucking second, will you? And you're sinking, and you're drowning, and you're throwing your arms out like a lifeline, and all bets are off. When that lifeline comes, if it ever does, you take it. It doesn't matter what it is. It's called Magnum Opus, Ronnie said, in the middle of a bar, as if he was selling me car insurance, and not a Schedule 1. Magnum Opus? Yeah, got me through my breakup with Ash. Stuff is fucking phenomenal. Mark, I swear to God, I should have noted his emaciated physique and his scraggly beard and his unemployment. And thought, well, it sure does look like you got through it in one piece, buddy. But I didn't. The logical part of me had been on hiatus for 29 days at that point. Yes, I counted. And I didn't know when it was coming back, if it ever was. What's it like? You get this cold rush when you inject it. Then, you just feel fucking awesome. Can't even really describe it to you, bro. You just gotta try it. Sounds kind of like heroin, except for the cold rush. Nah, man, heroin's great. Don't get me wrong, but it's just physical. Opus was made for stuff like this. Stuff like what? Loss. I blinked. Yeah, some hallucinogenic property, or something or other. It's real attached to your emotions. So, if you're going through some shit, it plays on that and you get these, visions. Visions? Huh. Yeah, for me, I saw Ash every time I hit it, and it was all healing and stuff. And I know a guy who lost his dad, and when he took it, dude, he was like having catches and going to baseball games with his old man. I mean, it was all in his head, but it's so real you can't tell the difference. I should have said, not interested, thanks, and left right then and there. But I didn't. How much is it? It ain't cheap, bro, but I know a guy who slings it for fucking pennies on the dollar. Come on, I'll take you there. Phil is a weird-looking son of a bitch, to say the least. I think he has maybe 12 teeth left, all yellow. And he weighs 120 pounds soaking wet, and he's covered ankle to jawline in tribal tattoos. Also, he's at least 50. He's balding on top and yet still sporting a silver streak ponytail with a roadmap of wrinkles. And as far as I can tell, the dude lives in the alley he sells from, despite easily pulling in upper 5 figures doing the actual selling. Ronnie spoke up first. Yo, Phil, you got anything for me? Phil looked me over and took mental note of how out of place I was. No tattoos, no piercing, short haircut. And then said, "Who's your friend? I ain't looking to get busted." Nah, Mark's cool, bro. Just lost his girl, so he's all in pain and stuff. Think you can hook him up? Sure, man. Newbie special. 1 bag for $125. More where that came from. I snorted. Shit. $125? Yeah, man. I told you Phil could hook you up. That's a fucking steal. I wouldn't pay that much for a used phone, Ronnie. I'm not paying it for this shit. I turned around and started walking away. But then Ronnie said, "You want to see Jess again, right?" So I stopped. God damn it. I would pay $125 for that. I think I'd pay all the money in the world, in fact. I turned around. You promised me this will work, Phil? Yeah, it works, brother. Believe it. I'd be a fucking dead man if it didn't. Ronnie took me back to his place and got me a rig. A spoon and a syringe and a tourniquet and a lighter, and then he cooked up a shot and tied me off. I was fresh meat and my heart was pounding, so finding a vein to hit was as easy as it'd ever be. It's ready? Just like that? Just like that, man. And it's all melted and everything? Will you just trust me, bro? I got you. Been doing this for a year now. Make a fist. Okay. Just nervous is all. Make a fist, I said. Good. He found the vein and cleaned the spot with a swab. What will it feel like? Guess you're about to find out, ain't you? I didn't get a chance to respond before he stuck the needle in, and then the rush hit me in a tidal wave. Frigid cold at first, and then a euphoric sensation the likes of which, like I said above, cannot adequately be described. I said and thought and knew nothing more. I just curled up into a ball and rode the wave right into the emptiness. Firelight's on again, Marky. You know I hate it when you call me that. That's why I do it. To get a rise out of you, Marky. I punched Jess lightly on the arm. Hey, you're gonna knock me off the hood. Better stop calling me Marky, then. Big Red. Or else you'll fall right off the cliffside. Scrawny little bitch like you? I'm pretty sure I could take you down. Oh yeah? $100 as I pin you in a minute flat. She didn't even say, "You're on." She just pounced on me and grappled my wrists and tried to put me in a hold. It was adorably ineffective. I wriggled out with ease and got her by the waist and crawled on top of her. Say, uncle, aunt. Alright, you asked for it. Ladies and gentlemen, the Crippler. I made fake cheering noises and patted my elbow and pretended to bring it down on her chest. Haha, the Crippler. That's the wrestler's name you came up with? You're just jealous, I thought of it first. Crippler is the shit and you know it. All I know is you probably kiss like a girl, Mr. Crippler. I leaned down and took the bet, and I kissed her. It only lasts a second, but your first kiss sticks with you the longest, after all. And when I pulled back, we just stared at each other. Her up at me in front of the whole night sky, with a band of the Milky Way reaching across it, and the cliff sides hit back by starlight, and my back down at her, lying there on the banged up, red-rusted hood of my car. I had the better view by far, and I thought, how did a guy like me get a girl like her? I woke up on Ronnie's hardwood floor the next morning, amidst an ocean of empty bottles and pizza boxes, and vomit. It took me a second to piece back where I was, and all that had happened, and it utterly broke my heart when I remembered it wasn't more than a narcotic dream. But what a dream it was! So in spite of the heartache, and the headache, and the dizziness and the thirst, I crawled over to Ronnie and shook him awake and said, "Holy shit, man, get me more of that stuff now." What? The opus. The opus, man. I need more of it. You know where Phil is? His head fell back to the floor, and he dozed off again. He was right, though. I knew exactly where Phil was, and after I called in sick to work, I headed straight down to his alley, aching and groaning the whole time and telling my own broken heart, she's real enough. She's back. In the dream. Just need another dose to get to her. I got to the alley 15 minutes later. I don't think Phil had moved an inch. Back for more? Yeah. That stuff was incredible, man. Give me another bag. I handed him 125 fresh from the ATM on 7th. But instead of taking it, he scoffed. Like I said, brother, 125 a bag is the newbie special. Returning customers ain't eligible for that discount. $200. $200 for a bag? Are you fucking crazy? Nope. And it don't matter how mad you are either. You'll buy it anyway. Just you watch. This shit don't let go easy. He was right, damn it. Of course he was right. I sighed and shook my head. But I gave him the cash, and I don't think there was even a fleeting second where I wasn't going to. There were very few things I wouldn't do, in fact, for another trip back into that dream. So I got the little baggie and went the 3 blocks back to my apartment this time, past the bakery and the bent lamppost, and when I got inside, I cooked up the shot. I was in love all over again, and it was every bit as wonderful and every bit as terrible as love is supposed to be. So, why do you love these old movies again? Because they're classics, Mark, Jessie said. Show some respect when Jack Lemmon is on screen, will you? At least for me? Okay. It's not like I don't appreciate the stuff. It's just not for me, is all. How do you appreciate something that's not for you? That doesn't even make sense. Sure it does. I respect it. I admire it for its influence, and all that. People say that all the time, and it's bullshit. Do you know what influence means? It means people looked at something and they said, "Hey, that's new and weird and beautiful. I think I'll try that next." Nothing sets out to be that way. It just sets out to be the best version of itself. And every once in a while, its best is enough to break down walls and barriers. Sometimes completely by accident. And everyone else will try to get even a small piece of it so they can be great too. But there's only ever one original. So all those movies you like, and all those TV shows and all the music, it can all be traced back to one moment in one person's head where a little bit of colour first stood out amongst all the dull grey, and they said, "Hey, that's new and weird and beautiful. I think I'll see where it goes." Oh my god. Okay, we'll watch your stupid, new and weird and beautiful Jack Lemmon movie. So I win? You win. She reached up and gave me a peck and said for the first time, "I love you." And all of a sudden, I was willing to watch whatever stupid, new and weird and beautiful movie she wanted. I woke up in my bed, and when the reality hit back, it was just a dream? Fuck. My heart broke all over again, and she felt further away than ever, as she always did. It had been 7 weeks of this, and every morning after when I woke up and I realized that the adventure the night before was all in my head, it ripped me a fresh wound right in the heart of my spirit. Every day was like finding out she was gone all over again. But the solution to it all was, Of course, another hit, another dose, another $400 a day. That bastard tolerance necessitated a doubling down of the dose for the same effect. Anything and everything that I could do to spend as much time in my fantasy world as possible, I would do. And I would do it gladly and willingly. So I paid what I had to. I hadn't been to work at all since Ronnie took me to Phil that night, and since then my savings had flown the coop, and my credit card had maxed. And I'd ignored a combined 61 missed calls from worried sick friends and family. And yes, I counted. But I didn't care about any of it. All I cared about was my Jessie, and our brief but precious moments together in a world that wasn't real, but in which everything was okay. If only for a bit. I told myself over and over until I truly believed it, that pain and suffering and poverty in one world was more than an acceptable enough price to pay for true joy in another one. So on and on I went. The sound of a rap on the door gave me a splitting headache, but I got up and opened it anyway, and let the blinding sunlight hit me on my flat for the first time in days. The man on the other side, a mid-20-something from the looks of it, gasped audibly when he saw my emaciated physique and my scraggly beard and my obvious unemployment, as evidenced by the eviction notice on the door and the tracks on my arms. So I spoke first. Yeah? Hey, I saw the ad online about the flat screen. That still for sale? Yeah, it's here. 300. Would you, take 200? I'll take 3. If I was willing to haggle, I would have put OBO in the ad. Take it or leave it. I desperately hoped he'd take it and go. I needed the cash, but I needed 300, not 2, since I'd only gotten 100 when I pawned the phone. Okay, I'll take it. He handed me a wad of bills and I helped him carry it to his car. When he peeled off, I didn't even head back upstairs. I just pocketed the money and went straight past the bent lamppost and the bakery and down to you-know-where to get my next hit. My head was spinning, but I didn't feel a damn thing. I just felt empty and confused. And it was dark in my room too, and hot. Dark and hot. Rarely a good combination. Jessie was nowhere to be found either, but then again, that was the whole point, wasn't it? Fuck. I collapsed right down on the bed. A queen size with a dip on the left that wouldn't ever be filled up again, unless I rolled into it in my sleep, expecting to get stopped by Jessie. But I didn't sleep. Not tonight. I stayed up and tried to reconcile the fact that those officers were wrong 10 minutes ago, that my girl wasn't dead, with the fact that Jessie was now 3 hours late coming home. They'd told me why, but they were wrong. They had to be. My girl isn't dead. She isn't. She couldn't be. And therefore she isn't. She was late getting home. She'd be here, right? Any second now, she'd walk through that door and everything would be okay. Everything would go back to normal. And I'd be waiting for her, right here on the bed. It's gonna be okay. She's gonna be okay. I'm gonna be okay. The door indeed opened a few minutes later, but instead, Jessie was there, swirled in the darkness of the hallway. In an instant, my heart rose and fell. And then the old familiar chill set in. There were a pair of eyes in there too. Red ones. Scowling ones. Ones I recognized. Ones that visited me all too often and that got a little closer each time. I pulled the covers up over me and shut my eyes and tried to ignore the voices, but they didn't carry over distance and they weren't constrained by a quilt. "You haven't called," said my mother right into my ear. "Why haven't you called? Your father and I are worried sick." "Look at you," Dad said. "Pathetic. Jobless. Emaciated. Unkept. Penniless. Futureless. You sold or abandoned everything of value. You should be fucking ashamed of yourself. Why can't you be more like your brother? He'd never do that to your mother and I. Ronnie then said, "Dude, you're losing yourself to this drug. You gotta be careful when you hit the needle. I don't care what it is, but you're not being careful. Not even I got down as deep as you." I shuddered and cried, and begged and prayed for it to stop, for it to go away. But of course it couldn't. Not yet. Because that's when Jessie showed up. 3 hours late, like she always was. And when I heard her voice, I burst into fresh tears, and shuddered and squeezed my eyes shut so hard, I thought they'd bleed.
"Look what you're becoming, Mark. I fell in love with a man with ambition, intelligence, humor. He loved life, but he died tonight, too."
I threw the covers off and screamed into the darkness, "Fuck you! Get out! Get out! Get out! Get out!" But the voice didn't stop, and soon the dragon stepped into my room. A step of confidence, then one of boldness, hot and snarling, and stood at the front of my bed and said, in Jessie's voice, "Him I loved, Mark, but I don't love you. This is your fault. You could have saved me. This is your fault. This is your fault. This is your fault. This is your fault. This is..." I bolted upright. It was morning, of course, and spread around me were liquor bottles, and the rig. Of course it was another dream, just a vision. It wasn't real. Dragons aren't real, either. But words are, regardless of where you hear them. You should be fucking ashamed of yourself. Why can't you be more like your brother?
"Him I loved, Mark, but I don't love you. I don't love you."
The words played on a loop in my head. I took a swig, but they only got louder. I grabbed the baggie to see if even a little more of Opus was in there, that I could at least snort it if not shoot. But it's gone. Of course it's gone. Why wouldn't it be gone? I was good at one thing, and one thing only, and that was getting every last molecule of this venom in my veins, where it belonged. Why would I leave anything behind?
"I don't love you."
I curled up again into a ball and cried a bit. Futureless! 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 They were right.
"I don't love you."
Nobody did. I'd ruined everything. I'd burned every bridge. Fuck. I'd sold every bridge and etched them into the tracks on my forearm. That's what I'd done. Fuck me. Fuck me. Futureless. I know.
"I don't love you."
I know. I don't either.
"I never did."
I guess I knew that too. Pathetic. I stood up. Everything hurt. Everything ached. My head swam. My lips were so dry they cracked and bled. Not like it mattered. I looked down at the needle. "You're never gonna win, Mark. I've got you. Palm of my hand." I know. You're a dead man, Mark. I know. Do it. I know what you're thinking. Do it. Today. Just get it done. Do one right thing. Just one, if you can manage it. I will. I grab my jacket. Shit, man. You heading out of town or something? No. You sharing then? Your buddies better be lifting part of the cost. Nope, not sharing. Okay, you ain't skipping town and you ain't sharing. So what's the deal with you buying in bulk all of a sudden? Don't worry about it, Phil. He handed me the bag with the opus, but he kept his hand on it. You ain't trying to use this all at once, are you? I said, don't worry about it. Look, man, I got like an obligation to make sure you ain't gonna try and do that. So make me a promise. You know this stuff. You know what it does. Yeah, it's the deadliest drug in the world, Phil. And you sell it for a living. Since when do you care about responsibility? I don't know, man. I just don't want to lose a good customer, is all. You know? That's $600. I went home and pushed past the eviction notice and threw the baggie on the old table by the chair. Then I cooked up my shot, a massive, lethal motherfucker of a dose, and I tied off. And I found a vein after a good few minutes of hide and seek, and I stopped. Am I really doing this? I am. I was. So I did. I pushed the needle in and watched my blood swirl with it before being consumed by the blackness, and then I pushed it down. Freezing, aching cold, a rush of quantified atomized pleasure, and then the black clouds swirled in, and my vision tunneled, and soon I was floating away on a dead river, clinging to the last bit of flotsam adrift from a monumental shipwreck, and then I was gone. Hang on, Jess. I'm coming.
Hey!
Hey.
Funny seeing you here so soon.
I blinked.
I didn't remember this conversation.
Well, it hasn't happened before. Huh. Big enough dose will do that, I guess.
Yeah, you can say that again.
She looked around the swirling, endless clouds in which she stood, as if she too were new to this place. And then she looked back at me and said,
What are you doing here, Mark?
I don't know where here is, Jess, so how can I possibly answer that?
I think you do.
Maybe I did.
So, I'll ask again. What are you doing here? What led you here?
You did.
I did? You want to explain that one to me?
I don't know. You were gone, so I followed you here, like I always do.
You didn't always do that. You had a life of your own once, Mark. It was good. It was rich. You had a future. Why are you here?
I wanted to see you again.
Is that such a crime? Well, here I am. Was it worth it?
It's always worth it.
Not even you believe that.
She walked up a bit closer and looked at me with those big, ocean blue eyes that made my knees buckle, even now, and she took my hand in hers and held it. It felt real. It felt warm. I wasn't used to that. Warmth. So I pulled back a bit. But she tightened her grip and then rolled my sleeve up to the elbow, exposing my forearm and all the cuts on it, and all the bruises, and all the tracks. Fuck. She stared at the mess for a second. I didn't want you to find out about that, Jess.
Well, it's a little late for that. This isn't you, Mark. Why didn't you just say no?
Because I didn't, okay? It was offered to me, and I was still reeling from losing you, and I made an impulse decision. But this stuff is different. It's not just a physical high, Jess. It brought you back. It brought back everything I loved about you. One hit, and fuck, we were right back on the road again, with the windows down and the music blasting and the sunset coming up over the hilltops. And we didn't know where we were going, and we didn't care, as long as we were going there together. For a few hours every day, everything was okay again. How could I say no to that?
It brought me back, did it?
Yes.
Did it bring back the first fight?
What?
Our first fight. Remember that one? Do you remember me throwing your econ textbook at the fridge and knocking down the magnets with a little dog on it? Or you just storming out while I sat on the couch and cried? Did it bring that back?
No.
I don't think it did. Maybe. Did it bring back the time you hinted that you didn't like my new haircut and how I gave you the cold shoulder for like 3 days straight?
No.
Did it bring back the time we had that stupid fucking fight about Jack Lemmon?
Yes, it did. And it wasn't a fight.
That was the day you said you loved me, Jess. I remember, and I was so happy you said it that I allowed us to watch the movie even though I wanted to watch Mulholland. You said it first.
What?
I love you. You said that first, not me. At the bakery by your apartment. You said it. And I was so nervous that I didn't say it back until the next day. I texted it to you. I said, hey, I love you too.
and you wrote out this little novel about how scared you were that you'd said it too soon, and that you almost wanted to take it back so you wouldn't scare me away. Remember?
Yeah. And we watched Mulholland that night. Shit. She was right. We did.
Yeah, we did, didn't we?
Yep.
But your little drug didn't bring that up. I guess not. Did it bring back, say, my loud chewing? You always made a point to mention it. I never had a meal after that without being self-conscious about how loud I chewed. Did it bring that back from the dead too? No. Or how fidgety I was. I could never get comfortable. Remember? Jesse, go to sleep. Stop moving so much. If I had a fucking nickel. What's your point? My point? Mark, I'm a human. A fully fleshed out, actual person. Not just an idea. Me, with all my flaws, and all my imperfections, and my quirks, and hopes, and dreams. You want me to believe a fucking drug fleshed me out like that? It's a drug, Mark. It's not magic. Well, whatever it did, it was enough. Well, it shouldn't have been. Don't you get it? You shouldn't be able to just bring someone back like that. I'm more than memories, Mark. You, of all people, should know the difference between loving me and loving the idea of me. I mean, fuck. What does it say about me? About us? That you could just conjure up one good rose-tinted memory and be satisfied? You said yourself it brought back everything I loved about you. Not everything. It didn't. I said it brought you back. You said both. And then we found out it didn't even do that right. Don't do that, Jess. Do what? That. Don't you fucking dare insult me by implying that I didn't love you the right way. I'm a sick, wrecked bastard, but if there's one thing I did right in all the time I knew you, it was love you so much that it spilled over and I loved everything and everyone else more because of it. And when you died, Jesse, I destroyed myself just to catch a fleeting glimpse of a shade of you. And I didn't run away from the pain. I owed it to you to stay, to learn that pain inside and out, to let it roll over me in waves and fucking ruin me as a man until I couldn't recognize myself anymore. I owed you that much. And if that's not love, then I don't know what is. We sat down on the edge of a cloud and looked out over infinity together. She put her head on my shoulder and then said, I loved you too. You loved me? Yeah, I loved the man you were. The man I was? I'm the one who's still here. No, you're not. This isn't you, Mark. It's not. And you know that. I think a part of you died that night, with me, out there on the road. I looked at the tracks on my arm. She was right. I hated it when she was right. I know you hate it when I'm right, but I'm right. All the same, aren't I? Do you recognize yourself? No. Do you recognize your own thoughts anymore? You're a dead man, Mark. Palm of my hand. No. Do you think that's what I wanted for you when I was gone? No. Is it what you wanted from me? To be tortured over your death? To think, fuck, if I'd only done this or that, I could have saved him? No. She took my hand, for real this time. I felt life again. It had been so long since I'd felt alive. How did you do that? Do what? That. After everything I did, it was you who brought me back to life. How did you do that? I don't know. It only ever worked with you. And that says something, doesn't it? Maybe. Maybe it means I'm still down there somewhere. I hope so, Mark, because I haven't fallen out of love either. Really? Really? We sat there for a while before she said, Can you do something for me, Mark? I'd do anything for you. You know that. Can you let me go? I thought you said... I did. That's why I'm asking this of you. There might not be a happily ever after for us, Mark, but there's still one out there for you.
And as your best friend, as your partner in crime, as your girl, I want more than anything for you to find it. I don't know if I can. Do it for me. She leaned in and kissed me, and it seemed like all the clouds and all the stars were falling into line. One last time. I felt a rush. I felt a heartbeat. And then I was gone. Hey, we got a pulse! I bolted upright and gasped so loud the EMTs stumbled back. Welcome back to life, Mr. King, one of them said. You overdosed on Opus. How long was I out? Out? You were dead. Blue in the face. No pulse. Dead. For at least 15 minutes. You're lucky your buddy Phil gave us a call to check up on you. I fell back to the bed. I felt terrible. A headache. Iron taste in the mouth. Parched. And bleeding. But I was alive for the first time in as long as I could remember. I signed the paperwork and checked out of the hospital when I could, and I took the long way home. I had no car, I had no money, no job, no savings, nothing. And when I got back to my apartment, it was an absolute wreck. An empty one too. Everything was gone. The furniture, the bed, the TV, all sold or pawned for drug money. But I was alive. I had a future, and maybe, just maybe, Jesse was right. Maybe there was a happily ever after waiting for me out there, somewhere after all. And all I needed was to run up and seize it. The idea was new and weird and beautiful, and I thought, I think I'll see where that goes. And I threw the needle in the trash.
It's official. I'm an old man. For the last couple of years, I've comforted myself by saying I'm in my early 70s, but math is simple and unforgiving. Today is my 75th birthday, and God, the years do fly. I'm not here for your well wishes. This is hardly a milestone I'm excited about. I'm glad to still be here, of course, but I find I have less and less to live for with every passing year. My bones ache, my kids live far away, and the other side of my bed has been empty for just over 8 months now. In fact, once I cast my vote against that goddamn Trump this November, I may have nothing to live for at all. So spare me your happy birthdays and congratulations, if you please. I'm here because I have a story for you, and it's one I've never told before. I used to think I kept it inside because it was silly, or maybe because no one would believe it. I've found, though, that the older you grow, the more exhausting it becomes to lie to yourself. If I'm being perfectly honest, I've never told anybody this story because it scares me, almost to death. But death seems friendlier than it used to, so listen close. The year was 1950, the setting a small town in Maine. I was a boy of 9, rather small for my age, with only one friend in the world to speak of, and his family, seemingly on a whim, decided to move 2,000 miles away. It was shaping up to be the worst summer of my life. My pop wasn't around, and my mum was a chore whore. Boy, was I proud of myself when I came up with that one. So, I wasn't apt to hang around the house. With some hesitation, I decided the public library was the best place to be that summer. The library's collection of books, particularly children's books, was meagre to say the least, but within the walls of their miserly structure, I would find no undone chores, no nagging mother, and perhaps most importantly, no other children with whom I would be expected to associate. I was the only kid with low enough social status to spend his precious days of freedom sulking amid the bookshelves, and that was just fine with me. The first half of summer was even more dreadful than I'd imagined it would be. I would sleep in until 10, do my chores, and then ride my bike to the library. Once there, I would split my time between unintentionally annoying the elderly patrons, and deliberately doing so. One pleasant lady actually interrupted my incessant tongue, clicking to a hisser, "Shut the fuck up!" at me. The first time I ever heard a grown-up use the F word. Big fucking deal, I know, but in those days it was unheard of. The dreary days turned to woeful weeks. I'd actually begun praying for school to start again, until I discovered the basement. I could have sworn I'd roamed every inch of that library, but one day, in the far corner, behind the foreign language collection, I stumbled across a small wooden door I'd never seen before. That was where it all began. The door was windowless, and made from oak that looked far older than the wall in which it rested. It had a knob of black metal that quite literally looked ancient. I wouldn't have been surprised to learn it was crafted in the 17th century. Engraved on the knob was what appeared to be a single footprint. I had the sense that whatever lay beyond this door was forbidden to me, and therefore probably the most interesting thing I would encounter all summer. I quickly glanced around to make sure nobody was watching me, then turned the heavy knob, slipped behind the door, and shut it. There was nothing, only darkness. I took a couple of steps and then stopped, unnerved by the totality of the shadow which surrounded me. I waved my hands in front of me in an attempt to find a wall or a shelf or anything to hold on to. What I actually found was far more subtle. A small string dangling from above, but far more useful. I grabbed it firmly and pulled down. Back in the day, lots of light bulbs were operated with strings, and this was one of them. My surroundings were instantly illuminated. I was standing on a small, dusty platform. To my left was a crickety-ass spiral staircase, made of wood and appearing ready to collapse at any second. The bulb was the only source of light in the room, and it was feeble. So when I peered over the railing to see what lay below, the bottom of the staircase dissolved into darkness. I was beginning to feel scared. This place, wherever I was, seemed to have no business in a town library. It was as though I was in a completely different building. But no 9-year-old likes to let a mystery go unsolved. Looking back, I wish I could tell my prepubescent self to turn around, go back, do anything else besides descending that staircase. You'll be spared a lot of sleepless nights, I'd say. But, of course, I didn't know that then, and I may not have listened even if I had. So instead of turning back, I took a deep breath, gripped the railing, and glared resolutely forward as I began my descent. The wood on the railing was dry and covered with splinters. I immediately let go, holding my hands out for balance as I carefully traversed the staircase. It was very long, and with only the dim glow from the string bulb far above me, my heart pounded mercilessly in the darkness. Even kids can sense when something isn't right. I think they just don't always give a shit. By the time my feet reached the cement floor at the bottom, the light from the bulb above me was very nearly a memory. But there was a new light source, and God, I'll never forget it. Directly in front of me was a door, massive, and a deep shade of red. The light was coming from behind the door, and it shone out in thin lines from all four sides, a sinister, dimly glowing rectangle. For the second time, I took a deep breath, and went through a door I shouldn't have. In contrast to the dank room I'd entered from, the room behind the door was blinding. When my eyes adjusted, what I saw nearly took my breath away. It was a library, the most perfect library imaginable. I gaped in wonder as I stepped, almost reverently, further into the room. It was beautiful. It was smaller than the library above, much smaller, but it seemed to be almost tailor-made for me. The shelves were packed with brightly coloured titles. Both armchairs in the middle of the room were exquisitely comfortable, and the smell, my God, the smell, was simply unbelievable. Sort of a mixture of citrus and pine. I simply can't do it justice with words, so I'll suffice it to say that I've never smelt anything better, not in my 75 years. What was this room? Why had I never heard of it before? Why was nobody else here? Those were the questions I should have been asking, but I was intoxicated as I gazed around at all the books and basked in the smell of paradise. I could only form one thought: I'll never be bored again. In truth, boredom only hid from me for 3 years. It was on my 12th birthday, 63 years ago to this day, that everything changed. Before that day, I visited my basement sanctuary as often as I could, usually several times a week. I never saw another soul down there, yet strangely remained free of suspicion. I never removed a book from that room, but instead would pick up a volume wherever I finished reading during my previous visit. I sat, always in the same deep purple armchair, and always leaving its twin barren and directly across from myself. That armchair was mine. The other was, well, I suppose I couldn't have articulated it then much better than I can now, but it wasn't mine, that's for damn sure. On my 12th birthday, I arrived later than usual. My mum had invited a couple classmates and some cousins over to our house to celebrate, a gesture which I found more tedious than touching. Really, I just wanted to spend my birthday sitting and reading and smelling paradise. Eventually, our guests went home, and I made it to the library about 15 minutes before closing time. That didn't matter. The workers never checked down there before they locked up. I was free to stay as late as I wished. This particular night, I was devouring the final chapters of an epic adventure. Knights, swords, dragons, and the like. I didn't smell it until I read the final words and closed the book. The once exquisite aroma of that room turned sour. I sat for a moment, unsettled. Objectively, I could recognize that the smell was actually the same as it had been before. That mixture of citrus and pine. I just perceived it differently, and I didn't like it anymore. It was the nasal version of an optical illusion. You know, the one that looks like a young woman glancing backwards, but all of a sudden you see that it's really an old woman facing towards you. You can't unsee that, and I couldn't unsmell this. The spell was broken. The odor also seemed, for the first time, to be coming from somewhere specific. With a fair amount of trepidation, I stalked around the room, sniffing the air like a crazed canine, until I came to a shelf near the back. The shelf was perfectly normal, with the exception of one title, a large, leather-bound cover of solid faded maroon, with one striking black footprint at the top of the spine. This was the source of the smell. I opened the front cover and saw one sentence, scrawled neatly in blood-red ink atop the first page. "Rest your sorrows down, friend, and leave them where they lie." I stared at this sentence, mesmerized. As I began to retreat to my chair, I turned a page, blank. The smell began stronger. Another page, blank. And the smell grew stronger still. I stopped for a moment, suppressed a gag, and continued walking. Then, as I neared the armchair, I turned one final page, and there, in the same sinister print, was the last thing I expected to see. My own name. I dropped the book. I began to sprint towards the door, but as I shifted my gaze forward, my heart leapt into my throat, and I stopped in my tracks. The empty armchair wasn't empty anymore. An aged man in a suit sat before me, one leg crossed over the other, contemplating me with piercing grey eyes and a light smirk. This was all too much. I fell to my knees and expelled the contents of my stomach onto the carpet. I wiped my mouth, staring at my vomit, when I heard the man let out a chuckle. I stared at him disbelievingly. "Who are you?" I asked, panic in my voice. The man leapt to his feet, grabbed me gently by the shoulders, and helped me to my chair. He sat, once again, in his own. "I fear we got off to a bad start," he said, glancing at the pile of sick on the carpet. "The smell, it does take some getting used to. Who are you? I repeated. Tonight, you will know hardship like you've never before known, he said. I come as a friend, offering you refuge from it, and from all other storms which lie ahead. I wanted nothing more than to leave at that moment, but I remained seated. I asked him what he was talking about. Your mother is dead, my boy. By her own hand. In her kitchen. The scene is gruesome, I must admit, he said in sorrowful tones, but was there a playful glint in his eye? Surely, you wish to avoid this path. I can show you a safer one. My blood ran cold at the horrors this man spoke of, but I did not believe him. What do you want from me? I demanded, trying to sound braver than I felt. He laughed, an old, raspy yelp that seemed to shake him to his bones. Nothing but your friendship, dear boy. Then, sensing I found his answer inadequate, he expounded, I want you to come on a journey with me. My work is noble, and you will make a fine apprentice. And maybe, when I'm done, he sighed tiredly, running his bony fingers through his thin white hair. Maybe then, my work can be yours. I stood up, shuffling towards the door, but never breaking his gaze. You're crazy, I told him. My mum isn't dead. She's not. See for yourself, if you must, he said, gesturing towards the door. I threw him a contemptuous glare and bolted for the exit. As my hand closed around the knob, he said my name softly. In spite of myself, I turned around. Your road won't be easy, friend. If it ever becomes too much for you, and I mean ever, he said, pausing to sweep his hand over the room, you know where to find me. I slammed the door behind me and took the decrepit stairs 2 at a time. I exited the library, clambered onto my bike, and hightailed it home. The front door was wide open. I dismounted, leaving my bike in a heap on the ground, and approached the house cautiously. The old man was lying. He must have been. Still, tears began to sting my eyes, heart pounding. I stepped inside and called for my mother. I heard no answer. I turned into the kitchen. To this day, I don't know why she did it. I've lived in that small town in Maine my entire life, although I've kept mostly clear of that public library. Once, in my late 20s, I summoned the courage to step inside. Life was good at that time, and my fear had begun to morph into idle curiosity. Where the door to the basement sanctuary once stood was only a blank wall. I asked the librarian what had become of that basement, though in my heart I knew the answer. There was no basement, she said. There had never been a basement, in fact. If she had her facts correctly, city zoning ordinance prohibited a basement in this area. I've been haunted by that sickly sweet smell, that poisonous blend of citrus and pine, ever since that long ago birthday. When I saw my mother in the kitchen that day, collapsed in a pool of her own blood, I smelled it. When a man claiming to be my father knocked on my college apartment door, begged me for money and beat me to within an inch of my life when I refused, I smelled it. When my wife miscarried our second child, I smelled it. And again, when she miscarried our fourth. When our oldest son got behind the wheel of the family Buick completely shit-faced and got his girlfriend killed, I smelled it. I began to smell it periodically as my wife became sick. She died late last year. And now, I'm alone for the first time in more than half a century. Now, I smell it every day, and it feels like an invitation. A few months ago, I went back to the library, and the small oak door with the ancient handle was there, right where it used to be. My evening walk has brought me past that library every day since, but I haven't gone inside. Maybe tonight I will. I'm frightened to die, yes, but lately, I'm even more frightened to keep living. The old man was right. My road hasn't been easy, and I doubt it will get any easier. Rest your sorrows down, friend, and leave them where they lie. He promised relief, a refuge. Was he right about that too? There's only one way to find out. After all, I still know where to find him.
I love to write. I love to write horror in particular. There's something about the creative freedom it allows. The flexible walls of reality you're allowed to bend. It's a place where you can put down your darkest thoughts or wildest ideas. It's a space you enter with no light, no sound, and there's already blood on the walls. Horror is a sticky, upsetting ordeal where you engage in a contract with the author that gives him or her permission to get inside of your mind and rip out your insecurities by the gory handfuls. As scary as it can be to experience these things as a reader, it's worse for the author. Imagine taking your most demented thoughts, examining them, asking why they're in your mind, and then placing them on a platform for the world to see. You present it under the white light of a blank page, and then bleed its twisted black blood into words. You craft monsters and motives with the sickest intentions. You breathe life into the characters you plan on tearing apart. You give these people families and loved ones you intend to destroy. You become a fictional god of death, a puppet master with knives for fingers, slicing them over your keyboard in brutal strokes of cruelty. I don't write this to promote what I do. I don't do this for some kind of warped respect. There is no honor in becoming a psychopath for the duration of a story. There is no glory in holding out the broken remains of your characters for the reader to see. Horror is a disturbing business, a cold and lonely road with no happy ending. I'm sure there are those out there who turn their nose down at horror, and why not? It's developed a bad reputation over the years. Recycled ideas, cheap scares, girls with black eyes and cryptic messages. We're all familiar with the cliches. We've all seen the steady decline of fresh content. We've all groaned as the big reveal unfolded, and it turned out they were dead the whole time. Now, I have no misconceptions. I'm not going to change the horror world. I'm not going to think of an idea that's so revolutionary it will flip the way we think about horror on its head. I'm not going to come up with a plot so incredible that publishers are going to line up and throw money at me. No, I'm here to tell you I found the end of that long, dark road. I found where it leads, tracked my steps with an anxious mind, and come out the other side. I've seen where horror can take you, and I'm here to tell you just how far you can go. I stared at my computer screen with numb eyes. I cursed the blinking slice of black on the blank page. I willed it to move, begged it to take its first steps of my new story. If I could just get a paragraph down, I knew I'd be able to slip into the comfortable flow of moving narrative. I racked my brain, scrambling for the words to start my dark tale. I needed to write, but my mind stubbornly refused to communicate ideas to my fingers. The space between my ears soared into the demented realm of terror, desperately clawing at the possible entries into this new endeavor. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I had written so many of these things. Never have I ever suffered such crippling writer's block, and the mountain of immovable cliches threatened to suffocate me. I had already tried the usual brain stimulation, long car rides with loud music, sitting in the dark while chain smoking, watching my favorite horror movies. Nothing seemed to tickle that muscle in my head that sparked my supply of spooks and scares. I sat up in my chair and ashed my cigarette in an empty beer bottle. I took one last drag and then shoved the butt down the neck of the bottle, listening to it sizzle in the dregs. I pulled another one from my pack and lit it, begging the nicotine to ignite my mind into action. Smoke rose from my lips in waves of indifference, and I rubbed my face in frustration. I wanted to do something big, something that no one had ever done before. I wanted to create a name for myself in the world of horror, a legacy that remained long after I did. I honestly just wanted to write. I had done fairly well for myself in my recent literary excursions, building a small following in some online communities. Most feedback was positive, which in turn fueled my desire to do something bigger and better, really give my readers something that would wow them. It's the dream every young author goes through. But then my ideas began to fizzle, and you burn through all of your good material, much like an aging comedian, but you know, with less gore and severed heads. I took another drag from my cigarette and drummed my fingers on my desk. Maybe I had nothing left. Maybe I had exhausted all of my ideas, and now was left with nothing but fresh takes on old ideas. It was discouraging, frightening. What if the inspiration I had so passionately begun this journey with was now diminishing into the frayed remains of worn-out tropes? No, I couldn't accept that. I had so much more to offer, so much more to give. There was a black fire in me that I hadn't revealed yet. There was a hunger buried in me I hadn't explored. I had lived with this my whole life, shielded myself from it, denied it. But it was there, and it burned hotter with each day. The more I immersed and dedicated myself to all things horror, the more I wanted to push the limits. With each successful story, I was fueled to take the reader to darker and darker places. And in doing so, I felt my hunger expand and rise, its gaping jaws begging for forbidden flavor. I knew where I was headed, and I knew what I wanted to do. God damn it, I muttered, stubbing out my cigarette and pulling up my web browser. I needed to do something about this intolerable writer's block, finding some way to get the wheels turning. I browsed a couple of my favorite horror sites, flicking through the images and articles, with eyes that weren't really paying attention. I had done this in the past, and I felt like I had squeezed all of the juice of possibility from these pages. Today I needed to delve deeper. I had played around on the deep web before, the hidden internet behind the internet. Today I was going to immerse myself in it, really soak my mind in its twisted machinations. It didn't take long to find some hidden sites. I had been here before. I knew the channels I had to take to reveal the shadow of the surface the web casts. The one I was currently on seemed to be a black market Craigslist. As I scanned the page, I saw an assortment of items on sale, ranging from hardcore drugs to murder. This tickled my interest, and I clicked on an ad that boasted, "Hitman for hire." I quickly read the summary of the services offered and chuckled to myself. This couldn't be real, could it? Apparently this guy would kill anyone you wanted for 10,000 euros. Like I said earlier, I had been on the deep web before, but not like this. I had merely dipped my toes into the cesspool, a curious peek beneath the curtain. Back then when I had first started writing, darker issues scared me. Not personally, of course, but professionally. I was worried about the content I was confessing. I didn't want to allow my readers to wander too deeply inside of my mind. But now I felt like maybe I could. I felt like I had gained enough confidence in my craft to shine a little honesty on my stories. I wanted to illuminate the black corners of my thoughts and create stories I had only fantasized about before. I wanted to shock them, throw them down the dark hole of my mind, and see if they could survive. I idled on the page a while longer, my interest dwindling. After exhausting my patience, I decided to check out a site one of my friends had talked about a few months ago. Apparently it was a snuff site, a place where you could watch real people being killed. I pulled out my phone and sent my friend a quick text. As I waited for his response, I mentally prepared myself for what I was hopefully going to see. I had never actually seen anyone murdered before. What better way to stimulate the mind? I didn't know why I hadn't thought of it earlier. It excited me. A nervous anticipation for the horror I was about to experience. How would I react? Would I be disgusted by it? Would I be able to handle it? How far could I push myself? My phone chirped and I smiled to myself as I read the message. My fingers raced to the keyboard, and soon I was staring at the red and black website. I sat there with my mouse, hovering over the top video link. I paused. Did I really want to go down this road? You've known for months this is where you were headed. I smiled and clicked on the video. The screen faded to black, and then showed two middle-aged men on their knees. Their hands were bound behind their backs, and one of the men was wearing a straw hat. It looked like there was a barn behind them, its red wall a foretelling of the violence to come. For some reason, I was surprised to see it being shot in the daylight. I leaned in closer to my screen, licking my lips, my eyes lighting up. From the corner of the screen, another man walked into the shot. He was holding a knife, and he went and stood behind the man with the hat. Without a word, he grabbed the man by the hair and began slicing into his throat. My heart jumped into my mouth, and I audibly gasped, gripping the sides of my chair in the process. I couldn't believe how much blood there was. To my shock, the victim wasn't screaming. He curled his chin down to his chest in an attempt to escape the blade, his mouth opening and closing in silent agony. The other bound man turned his head away, his mouth forming a thin, grim line. The man holding the knife stopped cutting and tilted the victim's head the other way. He placed the bloody blade on the untouched side of his neck and began to saw inwards towards the throat from the opposite side. I watched in complete fascination. After a few seconds, the executioner hit bone, and I could see his muscles bulge with effort as he struggled to sever the head. With a tearing sound, he finally managed to rip it from the body. He held it up for the camera to see, and then tossed it to the side, and then he started on the other man. My heart was racing in my chest as I watched a repeat of what just happened. My tongue slid between my lips as I concentrated on every detail, drinking it all in. I realized that very few people had never seen what I was now seeing. As the thought rippled across my mind, I shivered with excitement. Once the video was over, I grabbed a cigarette and lit it with trembling fingers. I inhaled down the smoke and couldn't help but smile, my eyes alit with wonderment. I had just seen someone die. I had just watched a human being executed. I hastily clicked on another video, and then another, and another, and another. I couldn't stop watching them. The morbid stage before me was an untapped vein of shock and brutality that I have never experienced before. It was honestly like having sex for the first time. The surprise of euphoric pleasure blocking out everything else. I wanted more of it, wanted to repeat the experience over and over again, each time bringing with it new and undiscoverable ways of enjoyment. Hours rolled by, my state of consciousness completely enveloped by this new pastime. I continued to chain smoke, my eyes held captive by the vicious images displayed on the screen. I indulged my mind with video after video, a starving glutton for the raw violence. I could feel my mind digesting it in chunks, a carnivore for carnage. Before I knew it, the sun had set and was rising again, the magnificent beauty of its span and color, a contrast to the depraved, pernicious images. I stared out the window, blinking as the creeping light crept over the horizon. My mind was fatigued, enervated by the monstrosities I had witnessed. I rubbed my hands over my eyes, pulling sleep from them like cobwebs. Jesus Christ, I muttered to no one. My life began to develop a predictable pattern after that night. I would go to work, come home, and watch hours and hours of snuff. I would close the curtains, smack a cigarette from my pack, and dive back into the deep web. It was all I ever craved. After a couple weeks, it was all I could think about. I floated through my days, working my day job in a dreamlike state, and then rushing home to repeat the cycle. The more videos I watched, the more my hunger grew. I felt something emerging from inside of me, that deep darkness I had kept hidden for so long. It crept out from its lair and began to fill me, its long tendrils coiling around my mind in an obsessive grip. After a couple months, I began to seek out more graphic material, tearing the internet apart for the highest quality videos. I wanted to find the bottom of the well, the absolute peak of human cruelty. I ignored the moral warnings that occasionally shot from my subconsciousness, pushing away the fragile arguments that bubbled to the surface. And just when I thought I had reached the end of the road, just when I began to wonder if I had seen everything there was to see, I found them. I found the Red Rooms. It was almost an accident. I was chasing a link down an endless rabbit hole when I found myself on a site I had only dreamed existed. After a few minutes of excited exploration, I realized that what I was looking at was a live stream. A couple feet from the camera was a man bound to a chair. He was weeping and seemed to have given up any hope of escape. On the sidebar, there was a list of items with price tags next to them. Hammer, $500. Crowbar, $300. Blowtorch, $600. Hacksaw, $900. Needle nose pliers, $200. And the list went on and on. I couldn't believe it. I could buy instruments to torture this man? Is that what I was looking at? Just the thought sent shivers of raw excitement down my spine. Who was watching this right now? How many people were sitting at their computers, pondering this man's suffering? There was a timer at the top of the screen that read 3:17, and it was counting down. Below the clock was a list of items that had already been purchased by unseen viewers. My eyes ate up the instruments of agony, and I felt a smile slowly stretch my face. I was going to see this man crawl to his death, ripped apart piece by piece, in a grand showing of live snuff theater. I pulled my feet up on my chair and lit a cigarette, watching as the clock gradually counted down to 0. When it did, the numbers faded, and a graphic of round green light lit up next to the video feed. 2 men entered the screen wearing ski masks, and they began to torture the bound man, working their way down the list of purchased tools, and I honestly couldn't get enough of it. This marked another turning point in my life. From then on, I became infatuated with Red Rooms. I found out when they were being streamed, usually every 3 weeks or so, and managed to save enough money to purchase an instrument of torture at every live event. The first time I did it was breathtaking. I spent $200 for a pint of bleach and watched, absorbed in the sick display, as they slowly dripped it into the man's open eyes. The thrill of knowing I was responsible for his screams excited me in ways I had only dreamed possible. I felt an energy rush through my body as the darkness settled over my mind. I wanted to do more, spend more, stretch the limits of pain into realms unreached. Weeks rolled into months. My money squandered away and saved until the next live stream. It was all I thought about, all I ever wanted. What little social life I had slowly faded to nothing. I didn't talk to anyone outside of work, didn't go out, didn't seek company or companions. Death and snuff were all I wanted. It was all I thought about. It was the only thing that stimulated me, the only thing that got my heart racing. Now, I didn't worship death, didn't think the world needed to be eradicated. I didn't hold a grudge against humanity. I wasn't angry at society. I just found live murder absolutely enthralling. The unflinching act of what I watched, the splash of human blood, the screams of a person in agony. It was all so real. It was unfiltered human suffering, boiled down to its most basic form. All thoughts of writing were gone. I tried once, but gave up after half a page. How was it possible to describe such savage acts? How could I translate the howls of pain into black and white? How could I describe a way a person's body slumps when they finally die? Trying to describe it on paper felt so cheap, like I was robbing the act of its shocking brutality. I realized it wasn't possible to write in color, but I wasn't disappointed. I wasn't heartbroken. I didn't think it had to do anything with my skill as a writer. I began to understand that some things could not be appreciated unless seen. No matter how bad an author might want you to experience what they envision, what they see, sometimes it's simply impossible. It's like trying to write down how music sounds. You can describe the instruments, explain the beat and rhythm, the ups and downs, but at the end of the day, you simply cannot hear the music. A year passed. I continued my way scraping by saving, waiting, and then finally purchasing Machines of Death as a new victim was procured. Looking back, I have a hard time forming concrete memories of that year. Everything was so similar, every day so robotic. During the weekends, I would hole up in my apartment and watch and rewatch snuff films, filling my mind until the next live stream. I was a slave to the violence. It remained fresh and new each time I witnessed it. My mind never numbed to it. The blade of its cruelty never dulled. And then the opportunity of a lifetime emerged from the depths of the deep web. Right around the 1-year mark of my new obsession, I was contacted by the hosts of the live snuff channel. They sent me a direct message to my account, and when I saw it, my heart began to race. They said they had noticed my loyalty to their work. They said they appreciated all the money I had donated to their bloody productions. They said I was an inspiration to the art of snuff, a true patriot to the darker side of life. And then they asked me if I ever wanted to participate in a live event. I had to read the message 4 times before I was convinced I wasn't dreaming. Could this be actually real? Were they really inviting me to go and partake in a live shoot? It was too good to be true. The thrill of possibility overwhelming me. I sat back in my chair, staring at the message on my screen. After a moment, I slid a cigarette between my teeth and smoked the entire thing while in a trance-like state. Finally, I placed my trembling hands on the keyboard and replied. I told them I would be honored to be part of their work and asked for the details and date. I asked them what I needed to bring. I asked them what they wanted of me. It wasn't long before I had a new message. Licking my lips, I opened it. My breath left my body in a rush of adrenaline. They were offering the spot of executioner to me. 3 weeks went by in a rush of excited impatience. I couldn't stop role-playing the eventual scene in my mind. I was going to kill someone. I was going to star in a snuff. I would finally be able to enact these dark fantasies that had been dominating my thoughts for the past year. Time and time again, I pictured myself sliding a knife between someone's ribs or strangling them with my bare hands. I didn't hold any malice in my heart. It was just an overwhelming sense of curiosity. I didn't think about the victims, past the fact that they were alive, and I would make them dead. I would be the one who would feel their life leave their body. I would be their end. The more I thought about it, the more I knew I could do it. There was no question there. Not once did I pause and ponder my ability to kill. This is what had been growing inside of me since my humbling beginning. I had always known it was there. This morbid hunger. I did wonder what would happen afterwards, though. Obviously, these were dangerous people I was dealing with. They were professionals in their craft. I could tell just by the quality of their shoots, the lighting, the set, the clean design of the website. Everything pointed to a small organization that had a very good system running, and somehow they kept it all under the radar. As I pondered these things, ideas began to grow in my mind. One of these ideas was I needed to protect myself, just in case anything went sideways. I decided that I would slip a small knife in my shoe in case I found myself in a less than desirable situation. I was told to meet them outside of my town, by an abandoned warehouse around 11 at night. From there they would transport me to the spot of the shoot, and we'd begin filming. When it was done, they would drive me back to my car, and I'd be on my way. I knew this was extremely dangerous, and a huge risk to my personal safety. But it was such a rare opportunity, I decided it was worth the risk. I was at a point in my obsession that I needed to take the last step. I needed to extend beyond just viewing murder. I needed to partake in it. I needed to feel it. I needed to hear the music. I needed to see the color. That's how I found myself in a van, 3 weeks later, with a bag over my head. I was nervous, feeling the road bounce beneath me. The knife in my shoe felt hard under my foot, a solid reminder of my insurance in case this went wrong. I had driven to the instructed location and waited half an hour for the black van to arrive. I was a mess of nerves and emotions, unable to believe that the time had finally come. I had spent so much time imagining this moment. I couldn't fathom that it was actually happening. Only one man had been sent to retrieve me, someone my age in his early 20s. He seemed incredibly casual about the whole thing, shaking my hand upon arrival and apologizing for the bag over my head. I told him I understood, as the rough cloth was pulled over my face. It's not like he tied my hands or anything, just asked that I keep the bag on until we arrived. As we drove, I told him I was surprised they had reached out to me. I heard him chuckle and say that sometimes, as an incentive to keep watching the live streams, they'd allow dedicated viewers to perform the executions. He said I probably hadn't noticed in the past, as each person was required to wear a black jacket and ski mask they were provided. He said they would have contacted me sooner, but they hadn't traveled out my way in some time. Obviously they moved around a lot, and when they reached my neck of the country, they decided it was time to extend a hand. I told them I greatly appreciated the opportunity, and silently felt a little uneasy that they knew where I even lived. Eventually, after about an hour, we came to a stop, and I was allowed to remove my mask. I blinked and scrubbed my eyes, letting them settle on my surroundings. We had stopped at another abandoned warehouse. This one was much larger than the one I had been picked up at. It was surrounded by swaying trees that danced in the dark moonlight, a gentle breeze filling the air. The man who drove me got out of the van and motioned for me to do the same. Gravel crunched under my feet as I followed him towards the looming superstructure. It was a mess of broken brick and jutting steel beams, a relic long forgotten by time and man. I felt the wind rustle through my hair, and I breathed in the quiet night. I could tell by the inky sky just how far we were from any kind of civilization. We passed a few parked cars, and then entered a silent ribcage of broken construction. It was dark. The man leading me seemed to know where we were going, and told me over his shoulder that we were shooting in the basement. I stumbled over the loose rubble, and stayed close to my guide, feeling the pull of excitement tug at me. I followed him down some wide stairs, being careful not to trip, and saw lights at the bottom. We reached the basement, and I was overcome with a sense of awe. Sitting in the middle of the vast open basement was a man bound and gagged to a chair, his head slumped to his chest, and I could tell he was unconscious. Surrounding him were stage lights, set up and connected to a running generator. They were spaced out to light the scene, but far enough away they wouldn't make it into the live stream. Two men were set up 10 feet from the bound man. An array of wires and boom mics entangled their space. One man had an expensive-looking camera mounted on a tripod and was testing its functionality in frames, while the other man placed multiple mics around the lights. Both men barely looked up at me, their scruffy faces indifferent to my arrival. The last man, though, turned to me and came to meet us at the bottom of the stairs, a big smile on his face. He was about 30 years old and had a hollow look around his eyes. His face was gaunt and pale, but not sickly. He looked like someone who had seen hell and decided to make the most of it. He shook my hand and dismissed the driver to go back to the van and wait for me to come back up when the deed was done. I watched him go, a sense of wonder filling me. This was actually gonna happen. I was actually going to do this.
You nervous?
The man asked, still smiling and gripping my hand. I shook my head. I just can't believe you're actually letting me do this. I can't help but wonder what the catch is. The man snorted.
No catch, man. Just a way of saying thank you for all the money you've put into our little illegal operation. And no one cares who's doing the actual killing, just so long the viewers get to see their tools used. Why not give back to the community, you know? Let someone live out their fantasy.
I looked at him. Is this what this is to you? A fantasy? I saw his eyes grow distant, and his tone shifted slightly.
It used to be. I had a partner who enjoyed this more than me, but well, things didn't end up working out. I see this as a sickness I live with. I can't make it go away. I can't stop my need to kill people. At one point in my life, I almost killed myself over it, but eventually I learned to live with it, and then I learned how to make profit from it. Work with the gifts God gave you. Am I right?
I nodded, feeling things cement in my mind. He pointed to a workbench at the far end of the basement.
Over there is the tools you'll use as they come up on the laptop. I'll be standing over there off screen to instruct you which ones the viewers have purchased, and in what order they use them. Now it's essential not to kill this man until we reach the end of the shoot, okay? I know this is exciting and all, but I'm going to be seriously pissed off if he dies before we're done with the list.
I felt a hunger seize my stomach, ideas exploding in my mind like fireworks. I understand. You don't have anything to worry about. I was born for this. He slapped my back.
Glad to hear it. I've seen men change their mind once they're actually here. But you? I can tell you're here to see this to the end. I can see the lust in your eyes. I've seen it before. I can tell you're a killer. I can tell you're the worst kind of monster.
I could feel the cold darkness swallow me up. I won't let you down.
You ready to get started?
I smiled. I think this is gonna mark the beginning of a whole new life for me. The man turned to the two techs and shouted instructions for them to get set. They seemed bored by the whole thing, a familiar irritation I had seen in others. I got the feeling they didn't like their boss very much. I joined the director by the workbench and watched as the sound guy went to the bound man and slapped him awake. He groaned around his gag, and then his eyes lit up with fear as he realized where he was. He began to scream, the sound muted by the dirty cloth in his mouth. I wondered who he was, where they had scooped him up. I knew they must be incredibly careful with who they choose, scoping out potential victims and tracking them for weeks. The infrastructure of such an operation was impressive. The director opened a laptop on the workbench and pulled up the familiar website. As he got the list of torture devices in order, I ran my hands over the array of tools displayed out before me. My fingers brushed over the cold steel, the possibilities of each one alluring me to its grip. I smiled. My mind set. There was only one way this was going to go. There was no turning back now.
Okay.
The director said, eyeing the screen.
Wow. Looks like the first one on the list is a chainsaw.
He turned to me.
Now be careful with this one. Don't get carried away. Maybe cut up his leg a little bit. Hack off an ear. Nothing fatal or too bloody. This is a tricky one to start with. We have a lot more to go, okay?
I spotted the massive weapon on the floor by my feet and picked it up, gripping it with my sure hands. This is a fantastic choice, I said, smiling.
Good. Now here, put these on,
he said, pulling out from beneath the workbench a black jacket and ski mask. I bent and scooped them up, my wardrobe for this performance. I pulled the ski mask over my face and was pleasantly surprised at the freshly washed aroma. The jacket was a little big, but I buttoned it up and tested its stiffness, flexing my range. Satisfied, I nodded at the director. The director cupped his hands to his mouth.
Okay, you two ready?
They gave him a thumbs up. My heart thundered in my chest, and I felt a massive energy fill me, a pulsing excitement. I stared at the man in the chair, my eyes meeting his, and I saw helpless fear reflect back at me. He was crying, struggling against his restraints, desperately trying to free himself from the waking nightmare.
3, 2, 1, go live!
The director yelled, bringing his hand down in a chopping motion. I hefted the chainsaw in my hands, its steel blade begging to be brought to life. My eyes never left the man in the chair as I approached the circle of stage lights. From the darkness I came, bringing with me the tools of death. How appropriate, how fitting that the light would expose just how stained I had become. I stood just outside of the circle of the light and put the chainsaw down to rev it. I glanced at the two techs, and they seemed to be bored. One of them with his eyes to the camera, and the other hovering over a laptop that plugged into some kind of circuit board. I gripped the pulley and yanked it, giving the viewers an unseen preview of what was coming. The small engine growled from the black, and then sputtered back to sleep. I pulled the string a couple more times, but the engine always faltered back into silence. The cameraman looked up at me and twirled his fingers, annoyed.
Hurry up!
I glanced over my shoulder and saw the director coming to help me. He seemed irritated. He shoved me to the side, flicked a switch, and gripped the cord. He yanked it once and the chainsaw screamed to life. The man in the chair was weeping, shaking profusely, his bloodshot eyes full of unimaginable horror. Thanks, I said, grinning. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you. Time to do this. I suddenly grabbed the director and shoved him towards the man in the chair. Surprised and caught off guard, he tumbled forward into the view of the camera. He tripped into the bound man, but caught himself as the chair rocked from the collision. The two techs looked up from their work, confused as to what was happening. As the director turned to face me, his eyes shining with confused anger, I stepped into the halo of light, grinning like a madman. In one swift motion, I drove the chainsaw into the director's stomach, muscles straining as I lifted his body into the screaming blade. Blood and flesh exploded onto my mask in waves of grisly carnage, the warm fluid coating the fabric with streaks of gore. The director's mouth was open in a silent howl, blood running down his chin as the chainsaw chewed up his insides. He made the mistake of grabbing the churning blade, desperate to remove the source of his agony. His fingers were shred in a splash of blood and bone, and one of his thumbs whizzed off into the darkness. I gave the chainsaw some more juice and tilted the blade down, letting my victim slide to the ground in a pool of his own innards. He looked up at me, confusion painting his face as he screamed, unable to believe what I had just done. I didn't hesitate. I brought the chainsaw down and severed his head, and fuck, did it feel good. Blood gushed onto the dirty floor, spouts of thick red pooling around the dead body. I bent down and picked up the head by the hair, the snarling chainsaw in my other hand. I stepped towards the camera and shoved the mutilated face into the lens. "You see this? You see what I just did to this man?" I yelled into the camera. The two techs were frozen with disbelief, unmoving as shock held them still. I lowered the head and looked directly into the lens. This man was behind the show you all enjoy so much. He constructed this bloody theater, built a foundation of entertainment around his own violent tastes. I suddenly smiled into the camera, but I'm in charge now. From now on, I call the shots. I understand your need for this. I splayed my hands at the bloody floor. I understand your desire to partake in this gory display of death. I used to be like you, sitting behind my computer, paying for tools of torture. I'm not here to change that. In fact, I'm gonna make it easier. I'm gonna lower the price on this site. I'm gonna host more events, and I'm gonna raise the quality of what you're paying for. I want to give you the performance you deserve. I took a step back and raised my arms. As a sign of goodwill, I will refund all of your money for today's little hiccup. I understand that this wasn't what you expected to see today, and I apologize for that, and I'll be in touch with all of you very soon. I looked up at the camera at the two tech guys. Shut it down. They didn't move. I revved the chainsaw I was still holding. I said shut it the fuck down. The cameraman scrambled in a panic, and the red light on the camera went off. Neither of them moved. They just stared at me, waiting for me to make a move or something. They seemed terrified. The disruption of their practice routine, rattling their senses into shock. "How much does he pay you?" I asked, throwing a thumb over my shoulder at the headless body. The sound guy licked his lips and fought to get himself under control. I found his fear almost comical when examining his line of work. 2,000 a shoot, he finally managed to mumble. I looked at the cameraman. "Same for you?" He nodded. I shut off the chainsaw and tossed it to the side. "I'll double that if you stay and work for me. All I ask is that you show me the ropes of this business. Get me up to speed on the running site, who the contacts are, how to scope out the victims. If you do that, I'll give you $4,000 a shoot, each. I know you're probably shocked I just cut off your boss's head, but I promise you don't have to worry about me acting out again. That was a necessary action I needed to make in order to get my foot in the door. So what do you say? Are you ready to help me build the most successful snuff site on the deep web?" The two men looked at each other, and I saw a silent conversation pass between their eyes. After a second, they turned back to me. "We're in." I smiled. "Fantastic." I turned around and walked to the man in the chair. He had been silent throughout the whole ordeal, but now that my attention was on him, he began to whimper, unsure of what I had in store for him. I kneeled down in front of him and looked up into his eyes. I reached up and placed my hand over his chest, causing him to cry out and squirm away from my touch. "Your heart is beating so fast." I reached up and pulled the gag from his mouth. The man gasped in lungfuls of air and ran his tongue over his teeth, grateful to be free of the cloth. "Please, I'll do whatever you want. Please don't kill me," he muttered, fresh tears pouring from his eyes. I pinched his cheek and smiled. "Don't worry, buddy. It's your lucky day. You're an old product, a relic from previous management. I have absolutely no use for you anymore." I paused. "Unless," I cocked my head towards him, "unless you want to come work for me." His eyes grew wide, and I could tell he was struggling to find an answer that wouldn't end in bloodshed. I shook my head. Forget it. Don't worry about it. You're not cut out for this kind of life. Go home. You're free to leave. I reached into my shoe and retrieved the knife from under my foot. I cut the man's ropes and pulled him from the chair. I dug into my pocket and fished out my wallet. I handed the man $200 in 20s, and I told him to give it to the driver who was waiting upstairs. Tell him to take you home. Tell him the boss said so. The man looked at me like he couldn't believe it. I couldn't blame the poor bastard. You're not gonna go to the police about this little misunderstanding, are you? I asked. He shook his head violently. Good. Now get out of here, I said, pushing him towards the stairs. As I watched him go, I felt a calm settle over me. This is where I was supposed to be. This is what I was supposed to be doing. I felt that familiar darkness stir inside of me and flow down my body and out my fingertips. Finally free after years of suppression. I was finally whole. I felt like I could finally breathe after years of suffocation. I had a lot to learn. A dangerous and haunting road ahead of me. I had taken a huge risk doing what I did, but a necessary one. Before I came to this place, I had made up my mind that I was going to try and take over this business. My hunger of late had grown to the point of uncontrollable lust, and I knew this was the only way I could live with it. I was ready for the challenge, excited to take the first steps in my new life. I was determined to build the most successful snuff site the internet had ever seen. I was going to revolutionize the word torture. I was going to bring new meaning to murder. I was going to build a kingdom around me, a kingdom I would rule. I was going to build an empire of death.
The deep web is one of the most amazing things on Earth. Not because of how joyful it makes people or anything, but because it is a completely uncensored view of people. You can speak your mind, buy what you want, do anything you want. When on the deep web, you have complete and total freedom. I had always been fascinated by the deep web, and at the time of this event and this story occurred, I was in college. Lots of people at my campus had really been getting into accessing the deep web. It was almost like a trend. With so many people getting in on it, it seemed perfectly safe for me to give it a try. Now, I had always heard of the deep web, horror stories. Stories of hacking, stumbling on disgusting sites, and people even somehow finding your address. These stories were mainly what kept me off of the deep web. But with most of the people at my college using it on a normal basis, I decided to give it a go. I asked a friend to come over and help me set it up. When my friend arrived, we opened up my laptop and began to set everything up. He told me we were using Tor, a program that lets you access deep web. He also asked me if I was planning on doing anything illegal, to which I replied no. He said that since I wasn't, we didn't need to install Tails, which apparently is a software that makes it more secure if you plan on doing illegal things. A little while later, everything was set up. I had my new IP address, and my friend gave me a brief rundown of what to do and what not to do. He made it very clear that when I was using the hidden wiki, that I keep it on censored mode, so that it wouldn't be less likely for me to see something I didn't want to see. After about 2 weeks of using the deep web, I felt like a pro. I had accessed many different sites, spoken with some great people, made friends, even bought some weed. I had become cocky and was ready to dig deeper into the dark web. I turned off the censor mode on the hidden wiki and began to browse the links. It took a while, mostly because Tor is a bit slow and many of the links just led to dead web pages. Eventually I stumbled on a site called All the Gore. It was mainly a big chat room with many different topics. I had fairly a strong stomach. I had seen some violent movies and had seen beheadings, killings, etc. through the normal internet. After looking at a few different chat rooms, I noticed how sick this site really was. The people in this chat room were actually killers, bragging about some of the things they had done. In the chat room, you could also post pictures. One man by the name Culture045 had the stage in one of the chat rooms. He was explaining in detail how he had broke into someone's house, kidnapped a little girl, and brutally killed her parents by hiding under their bed and then opening their throats. He then explained how he brought the little girl back to his house, raped her, beat her, and cut her up. I didn't think he was telling the truth at first, but then he posted pictures. They were the most horrifying pictures I had ever seen. Close-ups of the poor 8 to 10-year-old girl being brutally raped, beaten, and cut with a knife. Culture kept posting pictures. The ones where the little girl tied to a chair, bleeding, crying, throwing up, etc. Then he showed a picture of him with a drill drilling into her skull. The most haunting part is that while he was doing it, he was looking at the camera with a sheer joy on his face. I had seen enough and typed in the chat room, "You people are sick. You deserve to die. How can you sleep at night?" Immediately people began making fun of me, saying that I was just as helpless and ignorant as that little girl in the picture, and that I should get off the big boy part of the internet. They began saying I was a pussy and calling me an empath. When Culture typed something in the chat box, he said, "Really? Where do you live, buddy? I'm sure everybody would love to see you on this site." I then made the biggest mistake of my life and typed, "I'm calling the police," and having this site shut down. Less than a minute later, everything on the site went black, and then a new chat box appeared in green. In it, someone named Admin1 typed in the box. He said, "Call the cops and you will regret it." I didn't type anything in the box and reached for my cell phone. What happened next haunts me to this day. My phone said I had a message. I opened it and it said, "Call the police and you're dead." There was no number. It didn't even say unknown number. It was just blank. I looked back at my laptop and saw my webcam light turned on. I quickly covered it, but I saw on the screen a picture of me looking at my phone. I got wide-eyed and froze for a moment. When the admin typed again, "Put the phone down right now and uncover your webcam." I put my phone down, but kept the webcam covered. When he typed again, "Okay then, be like that." Right after, he posted my full name, age, and address in the chat box and typed, "It would be a shame if you and your college buddies went missing, wouldn't it?" he said. I then did as he said and uncovered my webcam. He then told me to follow his instructions on how to make it impossible for me to reach the site again. I followed each and every one. When I finished, I got a text that said, "Now don't ever try to come back." Just like before, he had no number. It still called the police from my friend's phone, but they were never able to find the site. If you ever go on the deep web, don't ever just mindlessly explore, especially if you don't have additional software to keep you more secure. I was a stupid college kid, and I just hope nobody makes the same mistake I did. I moved to a different home and changed all my information, but I still get nightmares to this day. Fast forwarding a few days, and I was still extremely rattled by what had happened. The police tried to track down the website, but since there was no way for them to recover my history, I had originally found this sick site by just randomly clicking links. It seemed pretty hopeless to find it. The police told me to change all my information about myself and to move in with a friend. After changing pretty much all of my information, I decided to move in with my friend David. David was extremely honest, hardworking person. He never went to parties, slacked off, got drunk, high. He was very dedicated to finishing college. In fact, he was one of the few kids I knew at the time who wasn't getting on the deep web regularly. I had told him all about my experience with the deep web, and that's mostly why he agreed to let me stay with him. One night, we were both up studying very late when my phone went off. I looked to see who had texted me and saw that the person sending the message had no number, just like last time. It read, "Check your computer." There was nothing else to it, just one simple instruction. I opened my laptop, and when I did, I noticed that I didn't have control of the mouse. I tried to move it, but the mouse just moved on its own. Someone had remote access to my computer somehow. I never gave anyone remote access before. I tried a whole bunch of keyboard commands, but not a single one worked. I noticed that whoever had control of my laptop was downloading a software, most likely malware, but there was nothing I could do. I heard my phone go off again, and this time the message read, "Look out your window." I was sitting right by a window. I didn't know which window the guy was referring to, so I looked out the one I was sitting by and saw a man in the parking lot leaning up against a white van. He had a phone in his hand, and when I looked at him, he nodded. My phone went off again. type in and hold down Shift Alt F5 at the same time to activate the software. I called in David to my room to show him what was going on. He seemed just as nervous as I was, but with the man just outside our window, we didn't want to anger him. David called the police right away and told me that they would be there soon. I didn't activate the software and just sat there. Eventually I got another text. "I'm coming in if you don't do it right now." I didn't know why he or the person in control of my computer couldn't do it, but I didn't dare to ask. At the same time though, I was 99% sure that this program had malware or spyware or something that would be very harmful to my computer, so I refused to activate it. David grabbed a baseball bat just in case the man outside tried to come in. About 5 minutes later, we heard the doorknob turning. It was locked, but we then heard banging on the door. We both freaked out, and I looked out the window again. Sure enough, the man and the van were gone. The banging on the door got more and more violent, until eventually we heard a horrible scratching sound. At least a few more minutes, and then we heard footsteps walking down the hall and eventually fade away. I received another text, "We will be back." That really got to me. When the cops arrived, they told me to look at my front door. I followed them back out of the hallway and saw engraved in my door my name. The police began to investigate the whole building, and they had a tech police officer come in and look at my computer. He began to do scans and investigate the weird software on my laptop. Eventually he managed to close and remove it, and told me that my laptop isn't safe. He said the core files of it had been hacked into, corrupted. We did a complete wipe of my laptop, and he looked at my phone as well. Just like last time, he couldn't tell me where the messages came from, and told me that they would be sure to keep the cops nearby in case anything ever happened again. The next day, I had just got home from school and was very tired. David wasn't home from school yet, so I went into my room and fell into the bed. I had just begun to close my eyes when I heard a rattling sound in my closet. I lifted my head up and didn't hear it again, so I went back to sleep. After a few minutes, the closet door swung open. I leaped out of bed and saw a man with a mask walking over to me. I ran for the door and slammed it behind me. I ran out to the parking lot, started my car, and drove away as fast as I could. By the time the police arrived, the man was of course gone. The apartment surprisingly hadn't been wrecked or anything. We didn't even find anything stolen. He didn't seem to do anything at first. That night, 2 police officers were monitoring everyone who came in and out of the building in order to catch the man. I opened my laptop and noticed that my wallpaper had changed. It was just a bunch of trees, but it had been changed to a sickening photo of a man with a mask. The same mask that I saw on the man who was in my closet, digging a knife into a baby's eye in what looked like a small cabin. I also noticed that all my applications and programs were gone, and I saw the same software as last time, right in the middle. I clicked on it, and it had already been installed, just like last time. It filled the entire screen, and what looked like a live stream was going on. I couldn't exit out, and the live stream was coming from a boy's house. He looked about 13 or 14, and was at his computer. It didn't take long for me to see that I was watching through his webcam, and he had no idea. I saw a small chat box pop up in the right top corner of the screen, and in it, someone typed in the box, "Welcome to our live stream. We are glad everyone could be here. Thank you, John, for being here as well." My eyes got very wide. My name was John, and they were waiting until I was watching to start the live stream. As I watched, I saw that the closet door behind the poor boy slowly opened, and a man walked out with a toolbox in one hand. He quietly set the toolbox down and pulled out some duct tape. He went behind the kid and put the tape over his mouth and grabbed him tight. The poor kid's face was total fear. He tried to scream, but he couldn't because of the tape. They were making a decent amount of noise, so it told me that the kid must have been home alone. I tried hard to exit out, but I couldn't. I then saw the man take out a screwdriver and drive it into the kid's chest. Blood began to pour out, and the kid made an awful wheezing type noise. I saw tears come from his eyes, and the sick man began to drive the screwdriver deeper and deeper, and then yank it out. The man then took out a hammer and smashed the kid's hands several times till they were nothing more than a mangled, bloody mess. I tried every command I could to exit out, but nothing was working. I noticed that the chat box several people were cheering the man on and requesting for him to do different things to the boy. The man then took out a handheld electric saw, pressed it against the boy's face, and turned it on. The boy screamed with pain as the saw went up into his eye, causing blood to go everywhere, and got the camera a little as well. I started to get tears in my eyes as I couldn't stop it. Then the man took the screwdriver, gouged out the kid's eyes, and took out a large knife. He proceeded to slit the boy's throat and tossed him on the ground. I was sick. I threw up all over the floor, and when I looked back, I saw the chat box. People typing in horrible things like, "Oh my god, that was wonderful. Thanks so much for doing this," etc. In the box, I saw someone named Culture045 type in the box, "Thanks for watching, John." After that, the program closed on its own, and I was left with the sickening wallpaper. I was sweating, breathing heavy, and feeling sick. Throughout the entire thing, I didn't realize that my phone had gone off several times. I looked at it, and most hateful, mean messages were coming from my friends and family. I asked my mom what was wrong, and she texted back, "You sent that sick, disturbing livestream to everyone. I can't believe who you are. The police have been called." I felt even more sick than before. Those monsters had sent the livestream to all my friends somehow and made it come from me. They had pretty much ruined my life within a couple of minutes. When the police arrived, I told them everything that had happened, and quickly they managed to explain to my friends and family what had happened. They really cracked down on finding these people, and a month later, 4 men had been arrested. One was Culture045, the other was Admin 1, and the 2 others were working with them. The site was found and shut down as well, and I got a new laptop and phone. I could say some horror cliche and say something like I kept getting texts or kept hearing weird things after since, but none of that happened. They were arrested, and I never heard anything further. It's good to know that those men are in jail or perhaps even dead, but what scares me is all of the other people watching the live stream who were there for pleasure are still out there, and that there is probably thousands of other Culture045s out there all over the world. If you ever go on the deep web, make damn sure you're as careful as possible.
Hey guys, it's Mort here. Thank you so much for listening. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to all the talented narrators who contributed to this video. If you wish to keep listening to some of these amazing talents, you can find the links to their channels in the description. Be sure to tune in tomorrow. I'm sure you'll all find it explosive. Any guesses as to what it will be? And if you enjoyed today's video, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to not miss your daily dose of horror. My channel is currently in a slump, so a comment and a like would be appreciated immensely. Thanks guys. Remember that if you want to share a story, you just need to submit it as a text post on my Reddit page or send it to me via email. Both links can be found in the description. And if you would like to do something truly amazing today to help support the channel, you now can via Patreon. You can find a link with more information in the description, as well as the links to my social media pages, which you should definitely follow me on. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.